Alrighty, what is up guys, Evanaldo here. Welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy these videos, smash the like button. I'm sure some people will not be happy with what I'm going to talk about today, but it's the pure, I just try to be as objective as possible, like everybody else. I'm sure I'm not perfect at it. Sometimes there's wishful thinking, you want something to go a certain way or do a certain thing or whatever, but I know I've talked about, potential of, continuing forward. And I think November is going to be a big turning point. I think if November is green, then that's really good, and that could extend the bull run into December. I mean, there's a lot of people that talk about extending into 2026. If you've been in this game as long as I have, and people said that. I first found out. I first kind of got into Bitcoin a little bit in 2014, but I remember talking to people who at the peaks in 2013. Like I remember people talking about it in 2013. They thought it would extend into 2014. And in 2017, people thought it would extend way into 2018. And in 2021, people thought it would extend into 2022. Now, this time could be different, sure. This time could be different, but that's all I'm going to say. That's usually like that's the thing with betting too. I mean, if you follow the trend more of the time, you're going to be, it's kind of like don't fight the trend until the end. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. But look, I'm a little bit afraid that this bull run could be over. I'm going to be frank with you. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a little bit afraid. And the reason why, the first reason why, and I mean, I know a lot of people at this point, I mean, ETH is my biggest holding right now. And being completely transparent, I have just sold about 30% of all my ETH and altcoin holdings right now. And I think that hedges me in a really good way because, okay, if we pump in November, December, I'm not missing out too much. But if this is the end of the cycle, then at least I took some profits, towards kind of the top. So that's what I will say right now. The other thing is I'm planning on continuing to DCA. I should have been probably DCAing out in October. But the strategy was a DCA from October to the end of the year. But I'm going to, unless things drastically change, like this red dot goes away right here on the 3 week, I'm planning on continuing to DCA out into the end of the year, into the end of December. So that's kind of my plan here. And I mean, this is kind of just the 3 week quarter 4, anchor. This was the end here, this was the end here. We could even go on, more. Let's just look at a little bit on crack and a little bit more data here because look, bear div, that was the end. This one as well, or yeah, bear div from there. That was bear div. That's the end. This was, I don't know, I guess the first end, but we did make a new all-time high for ETH, which, I mean, if that's at this point, I mean, I don't know, it's probably 50-50 whether we could jump higher. This red dot makes it less than probably 40, 60, less likely that, more light, 60% that's over. I mean, your money flow is still not bad, but you're getting that situation. 17 days, a lot can change in 17 days. And I do think that in 17 days, maybe this green dot could come back on the 4 day. This is the bullish case. And the 3 week could go away and then not come back for, I don't know, another couple months or something. It's a large time frame. It could take time. But if this does confirm, your odds would even go higher, maybe 70% chance that the run is over. You made your slight new all-time high. I mean, if you held through all of this and made it back up to these points, I mean, you got to think from these lows, you're still up currently, 170%, not too bad, 180%, not too bad. You know what I mean? Especially if you bought at some of these levels that we're currently at. So, you got compound interest too on it underneath. So, that's kind of the view I'm having right here. Monthly as well. I mean, that money flow does not look good. Now, you can argue, I mean, it keeps going down as price volatility gets less. I mean, we're still hoping for higher points, but, that high right there, that high right there, this one was that high. And then, the next one probably would be, fourth quarter red dot is usually, nail in the coffin, as well as, 3 week fourth quarter red dot as well. Kind of right here. That was, or that was, excuse me, this one right here, November, and this one right here, that was actually February, a little bit later there. For I guess, okay, fourth quarter or quarter 1 of the next year. But yeah, that would probably be it in that aspect. Now, what the Fed announced December 1st is going to be the official end of quantitative tightening. And let's just compare, the last time that happened. Now, I marked it out in my other ETH chart right here. This is important because the silver lining in all of this is that ETH could actually continue to come up against Bitcoin in 2026, given a more loose economic environment, especially with the new Fed chair, especially with an end of QT. Because if you look at when they ended QT, here it was ended at the end of July, and then you came down, I guess, slightly more, but that was basically the bottom for ETH versus Bitcoin, until the peak of your next bull run. So if it's like that, I mean, you got many years right now. Let's just see. Like, if it's until ETH peaks out against Bitcoin again, you got years to potentially. I mean, it would be tough to go up this high and make a new all-time high against Bitcoin again. You'd probably need like Bitcoin at end of this decade 200K, and then ETH at like over 20K, like 30K. Not impossible, but unlikely. I would say more likely you'll see Bitcoin at like 300 or 400K by the end of the decade. ETH probably at like 20K. I mean, maybe 30K, but this high here would be hard to take out. I think you can come back to this high at some point by the end of the decade. But yeah, so looking at that, let me just put that one, from this kind of area right here. And then we're looking at like December 1st so a little bit, right around there, December. So that would be another peak in April 28. That wouldn't coincide completely with the kind of 4-year cycle. In terms of the 4-year cycle, I mean, a lot of people say it's time to throw it out the window, but when you look at some of these charts, it looks like we're in a simulation compared to 2017 into 2018. However, if we've already peaked out, then that changes things a little bit. So yeah, but if you look at kind of the altcoin evaluations, in some ways, like others versus Bitcoin, for example, right here, this is a similar area. But I mean, I'm still I wouldn't I personally, not financial advice, but I've only sold 30%, and I would gradually, ideally, if you do peak in, okay, so this was like you peaked in early January. If you do peak January 1st, it would make sense to be DCing out from now into the end of the year. You know what I mean? That would make the most sense here. I mean, you had another little jump in May of 18, but everything was, incrementally down there. So, however, it also, if you look at others versus Bitcoin, like here, look at this, August of 2019, that's when they ended this. Let me move this over. See that it worked very well right here. Beginning of August, that was the low, some point in that, 2-week period or whatever. And then you came up for a long time against Bitcoin here throughout, while a lot of things went down through this period, this 3 plus 4 7-month period, a lot of things went down. This still went up. So we could see something like that happen. Now, I don't know where you'd want to, maybe like this, and then that would be in sometime in 2028 or 2029, you'd make a new all-time high against Bitcoin if you still think that's possible. This could have been the cycle that was kind of skipped. It's a little bit more like 2019 in terms of the QT and all that. That's what I would view. So this could generally go up while everything goes down, and ETH could, generally still outperform Bitcoin on the way down. That's an important point to realize here. And maybe ETH leads the next cycle like a little bit more, depending on economic policy and QT and all, and QE and all that. Those potentials coming with the new Fed chair and all that. Those are things to think about. So that's what we have right there. If we compare, now let's just look at what could happen here. So ETH, this is when they ended QT last time. ETH came down a good amount. This was pandemic low. You came down a good amount. So it's a little bit, December 1st, a little bit, about a month. That would be a double bottom type situation here at 1400 if you were to come down that low. I mean, that's a 70% correction, would make sense. Would kind of make sense in the bear market. Where would that hit? Sometime in, mid to late 2026, I would guess. Probably a little bit. I mean, if you peaked out, let's say you peaked out, and the rule of thumb is it's about a year after. So August of 25, let's say it's a yearly peak. Yeah. Like summer of 26 would be potentially that bottom there, kind of based on that. So that's kind of the macro right there. And then if Bitcoin peaked out here, which, I would say, I mean, you already confirmed the damn, monthly bear div. I mean, we're going to need a green dot relatively soon. We're going to need a November to really pack a wallop or something here, to get this show on the road. This 4-day needs to, come back, and we're going to have to see that within a few weeks. I don't know if the liquidity is there, but obviously things could come in. There's a lot of talk about the institutions and all that. I mean, look at what happened last cycle. I mean, Tesla bought, and then they saw, institutions move. That doesn't mean, that doesn't mean it can't go down. It doesn't mean, it can't go down. Anything could go down. Now, no, regardless, it's not anything can, you know. So yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of the thing there. And if you look at, kind of these areas, in terms of, let's just do some little analysis. We want to really hold 108. I think, this rejection here at 116 was not good. That's a big point too. You want to hold, but preferably you really want to hold 108. You're getting trigger waves to the bottom almost now. If you lose this, it probably is nail in the coffin. If you lose 102, it really, I mean, the odds, anything could happen, but the odds are very high that it's nail in the coffin if you lose kind of 102. And yeah, and I mean, the other thing too, I'll show you before we kind of get into some alts or whatever. A couple things versus SPY that look interesting. Berkshire Hathaway versus SPY, down about 30%. Every time you've had a drop down 30% against SPY, you've had a nice peak upward. This was a weird area in the late 90s. I don't know what the hell they were doing back there, but anyway, it could be, who knows? Maybe it's like, 20-year theory. Maybe it's like the late 90s and it's just goes off a cliff. There's under new management. Be careful with this. I wouldn't put, all your eggs in one basket, but it looks pretty good against the SPY, and it's also, in terms of hitting that area, Now, if we look at this against Bitcoin, if you zoom out here, you still saw that August low. August low, you've outperformed Bitcoin since then. And then you're about to confirm another monthly green dot. So strong area there. There's other things, that, even SPY versus Bitcoin, guys. SPY versus Bitcoin. This has outperformed Bitcoin since, that same like May or August period. Looking pretty good in the pre-market. I do think this could be the end, unfortunately. Being as objective as possible, I do think we could get a jump, 400%, 300% almost. Maybe this time it's 200%. That would kind of make some sense, a little less. I don't know, following this trajectory. I mean, Bitcoin's going to give you diminished returns over time, whether you like it or not, unfortunately. That's kind of how things get as market cap gets bigger or whatnot. So yeah, Bitcoin dominance. So let's just talk about this with the the QT ending. So when QT ended here, went up a little bit, and then you generally came down for a long, long time. And I would guess you may see something similar. You jump up a bit, maybe into the end of this year or whatever, and then you see this come down for this is that's the thing too, because no one's going to care about alts or anything at all. The last bull will turn bearish in towards the end of this year, if early next year, if everything comes down into early next year. But then here's your case to make a new lower low, against Bitcoin into, when would this be? 27, 28, the next bull run could be more like 2021 in some ways, with a big blow off top towards the end of this decade. Now that's years away. Nobody wants to wait years, but it's just the analysis that I'm looking at here, and it's just kind of what I'm looking at. So, yeah, I would say altcoin, Bitcoin evaluations. I mean, it could be new. It's probably going to be new altcoins that you haven't even heard of in the next moment. I mean, if you look at frickin', let me just show you guys something. Total of 3 made a new all-time high in this cycle, but unfortunately, your altcoins probably, a lot of your altcoins that you hold, unfortunately, if you do hold alts, probably haven't made a new all-time high from last cycle. Even for example, if we look at Solana here, which unfortunately doesn't look the best on the 3-week. That's the kind of the thing I was afraid of, this trigger wave to the downside. It made it slight new all-time high, but you're significantly below previous all-time high now. So, there's going to be new alts and all these types of things here. So, the ETH is still obviously the safest bet alt. Other ones, it's tough. It's kind of like penny stocks. You got to pick the right ones. It could get a little tricky. There's ones I like, but it can get a little tricky. So if we look at, more short term, I think ETH really needs to hold 37. If you lose it, it's looking more bearish on the 2-day, unfortunately. But maybe into early November, things could turn around. If you lose that, then, getting down to some of these lower levels here. And I mean, really losing 35 is going to be a bad point in my opinion. Now, how could you potentially try to trade this right now? I'll give you something that I'm kind of looking at. I wouldn't want to frickin', short into big support at 108. I feel like I wouldn't take this trade, at least not yet, but something like this could work relatively well down to 96, which is a big place. That's what I would be potentially, kind of looking at. So yeah, Michael Saylor. Oh, you can't even see it, but there was the the thing Michael Saylor predicting, reach first 150K. It's still possible. It's still absolutely possible. We got to hold 108 first if we want that to happen. We got to see the other things. I mean, it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens with some of these altcoins or whatever. Like Chainlink we could look at, for example, and we got to hold 17. And we're dropping below it. So I mean, it's not. You're still making higher lows. He just needs some more momentum and liquidity to just enter this market. You know what I mean? You just need to get it a little bit better here, and maybe that'll happen within the next few days in early November. I really hope it does. But that's kind of what I'm looking at right there. If we look at, you look at gold for example. I mean, I think that's probably going to come down with everything else. I think gold will rally a little bit more probably into the end of the year, and then double top situation, and then come to like a big place that I wanted to hit, like 32, 3,300, 25% correction in 2026 for a potentially pretty good buy. I think that if you look at gold versus SPY, for example, right now, you still have not made a higher high than that pandemic high right there, which I think this may not break through this point. I think when you break through this point, that's going to be momentous. But that may not break through this point until like later in the 2020s or early 2030s. That's what we got to realize here. It could be more similar to, and maybe I'm wrong. I mean, it's hard to say. Some people have gotten really bullish on gold, some smart people, so maybe they're right. But, you got to, if you look back, like some certain areas, like here was very freaking sideways in those, the 60s here. So maybe it'll be a little bit more sideways as you get into like if we're like kind of like at this area, that was like 22. I mean, you're getting that. It was very similar. I mean, maybe it'll jump up, but I feel like you want to go into a recession. You need to kind of get into a recession to really bring that up. So we'll see. I mean, generally, gold has outperformed the SPY in the last 25 years. But if you zoom out enough, generally the SPY has outperformed gold. Gold has bled against the SPY since like the 1930s or 1890s. And it bled right there during that crash, and then the 2030s it did well. So we'll see. I mean, if you compare it to the 1920s 100-year theory, you're going to come down a little bit more. That's interesting too, because 1925, then everyone probably thought it was coming up back then 100 years ago, and then it had one last drop down. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, guys, hope you got something out of this video. Just wanted to update you guys what I'm looking at, and I think if you do confirm this 3-week here on ETH, unfortunately I think this bull run is over, but it is interesting with QT ending. So I do think some alts will, especially Ethereum, may continue to outperform Bitcoin even in a bear market next year. Smash the like button if you got something out of this. I'm sorry to be more pessimistic. I may turn more bullish depending on how things happen over the next week. We'll see you guys real soon. Goodbye.